Okay, gonna do a short video with some experience behind it now on Genestealers versus Lictors. You know, and if you're thinking about the old codex, the Lictor, yeah, the old Lictor, I don't think he saw use pretty much at all. A lot of people still have that mindset, I think, and so he still doesn't see a whole lot of use. Genestealers, we all love them in the old codex, particularly when they could outflank and assault. So now, what do we have? We have two units that have very similar deployment possibilities. They both have infiltrate, so they can both outflank. They have infiltrate, so they go down with infiltrators. The Lictors have deep strikes, and they don't deviate when they deep strike, and they also work as deep striking teleport icons. Genestealers, not as much, and so I've been playing with different ways to use the Genestealers, try to really make them work, and so here's been my experiences and what I've really come to see as utility. The Genestealers, they're good if you're going to take troops. Oh, I just knocked that guy over. They're good if you're going to take troops that you might want to bring in late, that don't need synapse, that can outflank and grab an objective. And I think they do fine at that. Their leadership 10, so even if they get shot, they don't run that often. If you take a Broodlord, so some of my Broodlords, if you take a Broodlord, they have a really high toughness guy, which plays in if enough of the Genestealers die, or if they end up in a challenge or something. And he's a troop choice, so he's a solid troop. And he's a psyker. But where Genestealers suffer is they just can't do enough damage. In close combat, I know they have the attacks, and if you for 4 points each, you can give them Scything Talons, which is another attack. But it just doesn't work out well. They just don't pull it off. They're not fearless usually, unless they're in Synapse. So, you know, if you have a squad of Genestealers that charges in, they just tend not to do enough damage to win combat, and so they don't do what they're supposed to do. Yeah, they are AP 5, so if you go up against stuff that has armor 5, that's different. But otherwise, these guys they just can't cut it. So their primary use is really to grab late game objectives, because they can pop out of the edge of the board somewhere with outflank. I've tried the different data slates for them, you know, and putting 5 squads down at the beginning of the game into ruins near your opponent. It does act as a distraction, but the best they're going to get is a 4-up cover save, and they tend to just die. And if people have flamers, it takes them out. They just haven't worked for what they should work for. Now the Broodlord hunting pack might be a different option. If you took 3 squads of Genestealers, you got to pay for it, but they are troops, and they would have the ability to pop into ruins and grab objectives late in the game. So they do have some late game utility. The Lictors, on the other hand, these guys are essentially more survivable than Terminators. I know someone will argue this, but they are. Unless you're going up against ignores cover weapons. They have stealth, so in ruins they're looking at a 3-up. With one of the data slates you can take them, and they're looking at a 3-up in forests also. Otherwise they're looking, you know, at a 4-up in forests. So they've got a really good save, as long as they're not getting hit by ignores cover weapons. So they got a really good save. They have 3 wounds. They have decent toughness 4, which means that statistically these guys are harder to kill in cover than Terminators are, just on their own. So they're actually pretty survivable. They're strength 6, and they do have a short-range shooting attack, so they can take down vehicles from behind. My experience with the Lictors has been, if you taking 1 is not a great idea, but if you take a squad of them, 3, or if you take the data slate, take 5. 5 Lictors does a tremendous amount of damage. 3 of them pretty survivable. And so I think if you're looking at, I want to take a unit that's got a harassment capability, that gets line breaking capability, that can kill many things in combat, it's the Lictor. And the Lictor, he doesn't have Synapse, but he's leadership 10, so it's not that likely it runs. The Lictor has hit and run, which means even if it does get engaged in combat that it doesn't want to stay in, it can get out. The Genestealers, unless you take the Munitorum upgrade, they don't have hit and run. So my experience now is that I would go with Lictors. They're a pretty good unit for 50 points each. They don't get upgrades. But they don't really need much other than they could benefit from Toxin Sacks. But at Strength 6, even that's not that important. So these guys are pretty solid. Genestealers, sorry, I think you can take a few units, take one, take two, as scoring units that can outflank and don't need Synapse, but they really just don't do the job they were billed for, which is the close combat killing squad, because they don't pull it off.